Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. We will be covering Aston Villa taking on Manchester United. We'll cover Real Madrid and Villarreal game. We'll discuss Arsenal. Some bookies have them now as favorites to win the Premier League. We'll go a little bit more in-depth with that. We'll do a full Premier League Matchday 7 preview. And make sure to stick around for the end of the show where I'll be giving you my reactions to some of the top headlines going on in the soccer world. If you have a question during the show, we want to hear your input is a big part of what makes the show successful. And we thrive on your energies and insights, whether it's a quick comment, a thoughtful question, or an opinion you just have to share. Don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make absolutely sure your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that. Use the super chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit that super chat button and let's keep this show as interactive and exciting as possible. And if you prefer, you can also go to the gsmcpodcast.net to tip, donate, and leave a comment or question there. We couldn't do what we do without your amazing support, and we're so thankful to have you as part of our community. We have to start off with Aston Villa taking on Manchester United. Very interesting game with those two teams taking each other on. We know what circumstances both clubs come in entering. We know what's going on with United, specifically with Erik Ten Hag and United, and the poor form that we've seen of them. Look, it's just not been good enough with Manchester United. Their last two results been pretty poor. Losing to Tottenham the way that they lost, really getting dominated, outclassed, and thoroughly outplayed from minute 1 to the final whistle. And then the Porto game where they conceded a 2-0 lead, and it took a last gasp Harry Maguire equalizer just to leave with a point against Porto. And keep in mind, in the previous Europa League game, they only got a point. They've only got 2 points in their first 2 Europa League games. So the urgency was needed in the second Europa League game. It's just not been good enough. Erik Ten Hag, you know him, the way he survived last season. This season has been so far the same. Poor result after poor result, poor performance after poor performance. You had that game against Brighton where he made some horrible tactical decisions. They were completely outclassed by Liverpool. They failed to beat Crystal Palace 20-20. Then they got thoroughly outclassed by Tottenham, and then that point against Porto. It's just not been good enough from every asset. From the entire perspective, when you look at Manchester United and you do a wide outlook, it's been poor. It's been horrible. As far as Aston Villa, man, they're coming off at the highest of the highs. You're an Aston Villa team. You win midweek your Champions League game against Bayern Munich. They find themselves right now 2-for-2, perfect in the Champions League, going away to young boys, going to Switzerland and defeating them. This result, beating Bayern Munich, which we know that's a top team. In terms of the league, 4 wins. They had that 1 loss that they suffered to Arsenal, which is a team that's gonna be up there competing for the title. It's gonna be them in City, Liverpool. And then the point you drop against Ipswich, that late goal from Liam Delap, who did Diego Carlos. But apart from that, it's been a really good season for Aston Villa, and they're coming in off of a season where they finished in the top 4. Their manager situation, quite the opposite. Unai Emery, he's been a shining light for Aston Villa, elevating this team into positions that was not expected with this squad of players, because this is a really, really good team. They have quality in this team with John McGinn, who's been injured actually, with John McGinn, with John Duran, who's actually coming off the bench, Ollie Watkins, Leon Bailey. This is a team with real ability, real quality, and they have a good mix of talent. But they're honest. They're not a team that we expect to be defeating the likes of Bayern Munich. And he's had to. Unai Emery has had to adjust, losing, Douglas Luiz. That was a key part in that midfield last season. He was an important part. And to replace him the way he has, with the combination of Onana and Tielemans doing the role, and then the rise of Morgan Rogers, who's been playing some really good football this season, who's really been a been a light for Arsenal this season, for Aston Villa this season. What Unai Emery has done, being able to elevate this team, is just been sensational. And he's done it at every club. He's been, besides Arsenal, which was a difficult case there, if you look at what he did at Sevilla, Villarreal, now here at Aston Villa, it's been absolutely great. He's elevated his teams. He's tactically aware. He's able to make in-game adjustments. He has a pattern of play that he wants to follow. And the team is always disciplined, and they're not a team that will be embarrassed. What I mean embarrassed is they'll take care of the games that they're supposed to take care of, and they'll win certain games that they don't. They're not a team that will fail expectations. They're not that team. I've been very impressed with what Unai Emery has done with this Aston Villa team. And look, from all the evidence we've seen over the past year or so, it's hard to think United won't, it's hard to think anything will happen besides United get completely walloped in this game. And yes, we know Erik ten Hag at Manchester United, he does have the knack for, getting results when in desperate situations. Specifically, you go back to that FA Cup, which the win over Manchester City, which I never expect. I never expected them entering that Champions League or not Champions League final, FA Cup final, that they would have defeated City in that cup final. Never would have expected it. And maybe this is another opportunity for Erik ten Hag, because look, with this game being right before the international window, it is make or break. It is make or break for him. If he can manage a win or even a point, maybe that's enough to keep him adrift. I really don't know how he retains his job, even if the loss is tight. If the loss is lopsided, then I think it's done deal. But even if the loss is tight, I don't know how he retains his job. I do have to say, I think it's a difficult decision to make if you're Unai Emery. If you are this, United board. And then Sir Jim Ratcliffe as well. He had some comments where he didn't exactly back Ten Hag to the fullest. It was a little weak in his response. He says, when he was asked by the BBC in Barcelona where he was, if he still has faith in Ten Hag, Sir Jim Ratcliffe said, "I don't want to answer that question. I like Erik. I think he's a very good coach, but at the end of the day, it's not my call. It's the management team that's running Manchester United that have to decide how we best run the team in many different respects." What? We know Sir Jim Ratcliffe in the past. He's been 100% unequivocated in terms of his support and backing of Erik ten Hag. But this is, in my opinion, such a weak response. I don't want to answer that question. I like Erik. I think he's a very good coach. But at the end of the day, it's not my call. It shows, he's losing some faith in Erik ten Hag, and suddenly, the decision is not all his responsibility, in which in the past he wasn't talking it in this way. So I really think, this game is, this Aston Villa game is a huge game for him. And it's also going to be away at Aston Villa. Aston Villa are a very, very good team to play, are a very, very good team at home. They just defeated the likes of Bayern Munich at home. it's a difficult, it's a difficult outfit if you're a United team thinking about this. It is, I just, from what I've seen from United, the form that they're in, I don't know how. They're defensively pretty vulnerable, going up against the likes of Ollie Watkins or Jean Duran, whoever Unai Emery decides to start up front, which you can't go wrong either way. How can they, and then also this Aston Villa back line, where's the game breakers? Who's going to be the one that, breaks the deadlock for United? Marcus Rashford, he played a really, really good 45 against Porto before he was, shockingly subbed off at halftime despite playing his best 45 minutes probably he's played in 2 years. Is he going to be the one, can that Marcus Rashford show up in this one? In this game? Look, I just don't see United being able to stop the momentum that Villa on. Villa are going with like a bullet train, and United right now find themselves in a vulnerable position themselves. And I just think everything is pointing for Villa to win this game comfortably. And it doesn't necessarily have to be 3, 4, 5-0, but at the same time, there can be it can be a 2-0 victory, but very comfortable and very dominant from Villa. And I see something like that because, again, I just think United right now find themselves in a vulnerable position, and I don't believe in Erik Ten Hag. The way Erik Ten Hag has been managing recently, I don't trust him to make that in-game adjustments to be able to deal with an Unai Emery-led team. He's made some shocking decisions so far this season, and I expect that to continue. I expect him to be thoroughly outcoached, and I think Villa are gonna win this one. But who knows? Maybe United pull it out, similar to that FA Cup final. Maybe we see something like that. Who knows? Short break here coming up. When we come back, we will move on to Real Madrid and whether or not they have regressed this season.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Before the break, we did a full preview of Aston Villa taking on United. We move on to discuss Real Madrid. Real Madrid, right now, they're going to be taking on Villarreal this weekend. But before that, we have to talk about so far Real Madrid's start to the season. Not the greatest start for them standards. 5 wins, 3 draws in La Liga, which is not horrible. It's not the best, but it's not horrible. And they find themselves currently sitting 3 points adrift of Barcelona, with Barcelona having that perfect 7-7 start and recently losing their first game to Osasuna, away to Osasuna. But Barcelona have had a really good start to the season, and hence Real Madrid to find themselves 3 points behind. And it hasn't been the worst start for Real Madrid. There was some games that they looked very stagnant early on, and some some games that they needed breaks in to get victories in early on in the La Liga campaign. But, they were slowly finding some momentum, and then they suffered that shock loss midweek to Lille, away to Lille. And it was a pretty poor performance from Real Madrid, given the standard that Real Madrid have set for themselves, the history of the whole club. Honestly, I was going to say given the last few years, but really the entire history of the football club. It was a shocking performance, and it was a poor performance, and there was a lot of things there that you could be really critical about if you were from the outside looking in terms of that performance. And there's been some moments that you can be critical about from Real Madrid so far this season. But looking big picture, there's been a lot of negativity, especially when you look at it from the media outlets in Spain regarding Real Madrid so far this season. A lot of, especially look at the headlines in the newspaper. It's panic time in Madrid. It's this, it's that, it's that. Look, at the end of the day, with the Spanish press, the Spanish media, we knew it was, they're extreme overreaction actors. That's just their nature. They're very, very extreme overreactors. They're very, very critical, especially of a team like Real Madrid. And it's expected. When you wear that badge, the criticism will come. I think a little bit of that has been a little bit too much. I don't think this is a Real Madrid team collapsing. But I do have to say, this is a Real Madrid team that regressed from last season. They are a little less, they're a little less potent than last season. And I think the biggest thing is losing Toni Kroos in the midfield. That connector, that conductor, you really don't understand what kind of player Real Madrid have till you lose him. It's a philosophy that you can use for life in general. You don't realize what you have until you lose it. Actually, maybe I'll reframe that a little bit. You don't realize how valuable the asset you have until you lose it. And Toni Kroos, he was an important conductor, important composer. He's important. Those long diagonal balls he can hit from one end to the pitch to another. Those line-breaking passes that he made. His ability to control tempo and get everybody in the right areas and be that connector in midfield. It's something, they're missing that composure in the midfield, and the attackers are struggling to get the balls in key areas in which that they can make an impact. And then you have Mbappe being in there with Vinicius and Rodrigo. You have three players that primarily love playing on the left-hand side, cutting into the right. And they're all a little bit stagnant, and it's not working. Yes, Mbappe had when Mbappe had a few set of games, I think it was 5 games where he had a goal, but you come back against that in that Lille game, he comes onto the pitch, and there's a moment him and Vinicius are both on the left-hand side while Bellingham is getting tucked, he can't really have an outlet, and he's getting picked off the ball because there's no outlet. Mbappe and Vinicius are just standing out there on the left-hand side, and this is down this is 1-0 down within the last 10 minutes or so of the game, where you need to generate an attack, and Real Madrid are struggling even to play out because of the stagnant nature of Vinicius and Mbappe being on that left-hand side, not really being involved in play, and they both have no defensive bone in them. We saw the documentary with Luis Enrique discussing with Mbappe after that Barcelona PSG game, trying to motivate him to have some sort of pursuit to play defensively, to press, to give any sort of effort defensively. And then I discussed yesterday, Mbappe's ego was going to prevent him from being a top class, all-time player. But bringing in a guy like an Mbappe, messing up the rhythm of a team that had some great rhythm in terms of winning Champions Leagues, winning La Ligas, that could mess it up as well. It messes up right now the chemistry. They're still trying to fix it. They're still trying to get it sorted. And also, I think Mbappe and his locker room presence can almost be a sort of black hole, almost what he was at PSG, in my opinion. Part of a lot of the things, and he's not the only problem at PSG. There was plenty of problems there, believe me. But Mbappe had a lot of culpability in it, and I think and I don't know if it's crazy to say, but I do think he can he can hold down this Real Madrid team. He can prevent them from taking that next step. I don't think it was always as simple as, oh my goodness, the best team in Europe, the Champions League winners, are adding Mbappe. Like, they're just gonna become all-time. No, I didn't think it was that simple. You also have Erik, he's a really, really good player. Look, he's 18. I don't want to be too critical of him. Right, he's 18 years old, but again, is he, he's Brazilian. Does he really have that Brazilian flair, that Brazilian technical ability to play in tight spaces and all that? Is he that technically of a gifted player? No. I see a player that has pace, that can play in behind, that can play off the back shoulder of a center half, get in behind, and that has can play in transition and have a wicked, really powerful shot on him, that has the ability to score, wonder goals, and he has that good factor of being at the right place at the right time, that X factor of ability. But is he really the best player? Is he really the most technically gifted? Or he's not really one of those players. I think the ceiling with Erik shouldn't really be as high as it is. Yes, I think he can be a player like a Sergio Aguero. I think that's the perfect comp for him. But he's not going to be somebody like a Messi, Hazard, Neymar. That's not his game. He's not that gifted. And honestly, too, I know he's young, but, he has a few moments where he takes on shots and he scored against Stuttgart doing it, where I thought it was a horrible shot selection. He had balls he can play in from one side to another. He decided to take it on himself. He ended up scoring, remarkably. He did that against Lille. He had a Bellingham. He had Bellingham for an opportunity. I don't know if it was Lille or Atletico, one of those two. He had a Bellingham there. His decision-making in the final third, there's a little bit of a selfish nature to him. And look, yes, he's 18, playing his first season at the European level, and it's someone that needs to develop and all that. But again, and that side of it, in terms of his decision-making, that can be coached and that can be taught. But the technique aspect of it, him not being that's just the player. That's not his, that's not his ability. And when you don't have those sort of abilities, your ceiling is a little bit lower. But I do think they need to Real Madrid. I know Brahim Diaz, I think right now he's injured, but Brahim Diaz, Arda Güler, these are players that need to play more because they provide balance in there. Because they're left-footed, they can play off that right-hand side and be natural in that position. They're both really, really good, gifted, technical players. They can provide balance. Carlo Ancelotti has to use them more. They have to be more of a focal part of this team. Yes, Mbappe, Rodrigo, Vinicius, these are your three most talented attackers at the club, and you want to get them all in there, but you need to have some sort of balance within the team and a rhythm within the team. So I don't think everything is falling off for Real Madrid or anything like that. I think that's way too overreacting and way too early for that. We need to see a little bit more and let this team adjust even more. But Real Madrid players, they shouldn't be surprised. The criticism will come when you play for Real Madrid. Now Real Madrid, they take on a Villarreal team that has had a really good start to their campaign in La Liga as well. They find themselves 17 points, only 4 points out off the top. This game will be played at the Bernabeu, so that's never a that's never an easy outfit for any team going away to the Bernabeu. But I'm looking forward to it. I think Villarreal have more than enough quality to threaten Real Madrid and to give them issues. They've had a really good start to the season, and I think defensively they're solid as well. And then Villarreal have been really, really good in terms of their attack so far this season. They've created a lot of opportunities. They play some really, really good football. So I'm looking forward to this game. I think there's quality all over the pitch, and yes, obviously I do think Real Madrid are the favorites. I think Real Madrid are undefeated in, I believe it was their last at home. I'm talking about at home in La Liga. I think it goes back to 40 games without a defeat. Real Madrid have been at home. So obviously, it's a difficult outfit to go to Bernabeu and get the victory. But I do think Villarreal has enough to go in there, get a point. Do what I want to choose them. Will I choose them? Probably not. But I think overall it is going to be a really, really good game. Short break here coming up. When we come back, we'll react to Arsenal becoming, certain bookies having them as favorites to win the Premier League.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Before the break, we discussed Real Madrid regressing from last season, potential regression from last season as we previewed their game against Villarreal. We move on to react to Arsenal. They have become, according to some bookies, favorites to win the Premier League. Obviously that's interesting to me that they're now the favorites to win the Premier League. As City, I assume City fell because of the loss of Rodri. Rodri being out for the season with the ACL injury, which that's a bad loss. Rodri is a player. What a player! What a dictator in terms of being able to dictate the tempo. I give the great sixes. I call them composers, dictators, tempo dictators, connectors, and they're so vital because they connect the back line to the attack, and everything operates to them. They're the engine of a team. A good six is the engine of a team. He does all the things that is not, the sexy aspects of a football player. He does all of the dirty work, all of the little things that don't look, great, but they're so vital, especially with Rodri. Rodri, he gives you that in terms of his quality on the ball, but defensively also, he wins a lot of 50-50 battles in midfield. He can cover holes for center halves or fullbacks if they push up. If center halves are split out wide, he can sit in between them and help them defend if they're in a vulnerable position. He intercepts passes. He does he's just so vital to the team defensively and going forward. And yeah, that's a big loss. He was an important part for City last year as they won the Premier League, important part for Spain as they won the European Championship, and of course, losing that sort of player. And whatever I'm about to say future on, I'm going to say something after this, I don't want it to seem like I'm minimizing the impact of Rodri. He's a brilliant player. But I think City has dealt with worse over the last, in terms of injury, I think City have dealt with worse over the last 6-7 years. And Pep Guardiola has dealt with worse, and he's been able to adapt. Now, Rodri is a big loss, but I do think City, they're going to find a way to make up for that loss, whether it is the combination of a Kovacic and Gundogan now coming back to the club, whether or not they have to play a different formation to accommodate for the loss of Rodri. it's something that they will adjust. Whether we now see John Stones start tucking in a little bit more in midfield, as we saw him play that 1 year that they won the Champions League, we'll see a trinkle up the sleeve with Pep Guardiola. There's going to be something, and there's so much quality in this team still. They're still brilliant, and they've had this great start to the season, and they did it without Rodri throughout. So far they haven't had Rodri hasn't played this entire season besides the game that he tore his ACL in against Arsenal. I think he also played in that draw against Inter Milan in the Champions League, but Rodri hasn't played much. So, and Arsenal have still been, Man City have still been dominant and played some really, really good football. You lose Rodri, but you still have Erling Haaland that scored 10 goals in 5 games so far. There's still some real serious quality in this team. So for me, I wouldn't be overly, if I was a City fan, I wouldn't be overly panicking about this. Obviously, it's a big loss and it's something they have to adapt. But it shouldn't signal panics. This is a City team that's gone through, long stretches without De Bruyne, arguably the best player in the world. They've lost key players in that team due to injury, and they've been able to adapt. When you have the quality, let me just read some of the players that were on the bench for Manchester City when they played their most important game against Arsenal so far this season. Let me read you the players that they had on the bench: John Stones, Mateo Kovacic, Jack Grealish, Phil Foden. Mateus Nunes, who's going to start getting more minutes now because he's the only other 6 that they have at this club at this time. Mateus Nunes, he never plays for Manchester City. He never plays for Manchester City, and I thought he was a good player in my opinion when I saw him play at Wolves. There was a reason why he made this move to City. Now I think he'll get a little bit. I don't think he's going to get put in the starting 11 or anything. But he's going to be that, he's going to be a key rotational piece with Rodri being out. His impact is going to go up. But look at Rico Lewis. Look at those players that this City team have on the bench. So for me, they will be able to adapt. They'll be able to adapt. It's something that they will figure out. As far as Arsenal, look, they've had a good start to the season in terms they haven't played the best football, but they've been getting important results, winning away to Aston Villa, North London derby, winning away against Tottenham, losing Martin Odegaard, but we're being able to rely on individual moments of magic with the combination of set pieces to still be able to create opportunities to just be enough to win games because of, more defensive nature to them now with lacking that creativity. And, I believe Mikel Arteta had a philosophy. He wanted to get through the early part of the season, just get the results, whether it's ugly or not, just get the results and steadily build yourself throughout the season as a dominant team, as a team that plays some really, really good attacking football. And something that we'll start seeing now, I think, within the next coming weeks or so, where Arsenal's, overall, performances start getting much, much better. We start seeing a more forward-thinking, more protagonistic looking Arsenal in which they're taking the game to the opposition, where they're pressing high, where they're playing a game higher up the pitch. I expect to see that because I don't think with the way Arsenal have been performing earlier this season, don't think they can win the league title that way with how they've been playing so far this season throughout the duration of the season. I think it's something. You look back what Arsenal did last season, they had that really good second half of the year, but early on in the year, they had some performances, they had some results where it was, they dropped the points, and those points came back to bite them later on. So I think Mikel Arteta is looking at it, maybe he came and discussed with the staff, let's just take care of the early results. Let's just take care of them no matter how we can get them and steadily make this team, the team that we saw play last season, that second half of the season. But the thing with Arsenal is, can they get it done? Is the mentality of this club enough to compete game in, game out with City? Yes, they proved that last season, but they fell just short. Is that where they just are? They're just falling. They're just short of City. They're just short of City. Because my thing with Arsenal is, even now how great they are, I still think that have that factor that Arsenal gene in which when the going gets really, really tough and the big time comes, they fold. they fold. I still think you have a little bit of that in this Arsenal team still. In my opinion, it's been that way since Mikel Arteta has come to the club. Arteta has been a really, really good manager, and he's had teams that have had 89 points, 87 points, all that. He's had really, really good teams in Arsenal, but he's been there for like 6 years now, and they only have one trophy, one FA Cup. They haven't been able to take the next step. We saw the way that they looked in Europe. That Arsenal team we saw in Europe was nowhere near the Arsenal team that we saw in the Premier League last season. That Arsenal team, it took them penalties to get past Porto. And then against Bayern Munich, one of the worst Bayern Munich teams over the past decade or so, they lost to them. And when they went down a goal with that Joshua Kimmich late header, for that last 25 minutes or so where Arsenal were chasing it, they never looked like they were going to be able to create any sort of opportunity. They looked lifeless. They looked dead. They looked out of ideas. They looked out. They looked, what's the word? They looked like they didn't belong. And I think that says something. If you compare, there was, again, they had 5-0 wins, 6-0 wins, 5-0 wins, and then they had a game in between all those results with a 1-0 loss going away to Porto, sandwich in it. And it was just like, that defines Arsenal. When the going gets tough, when it's the high pressurized moments, they fold. And I don't know why it doesn't. I don't understand why that won't happen again with Arsenal. That's just the DNA of that football club. And I don't think these players have that mentality to be able to defeat the likes of City in this race. I don't. I think Declan Rice is a vulnerable player. I think defensively, yes, Saliba is a good center half, but Gabriel, they can defend good as a unit, and they can defend good even when they've been defending this season. They've been defending with a low block. But again, there's some passages in that team. I don't think Gabriel is really at that level. David Raya, I don't think he's at that level. Martinelli, he's a good winger, but can you really say he's a really good winger? Is he really a top winger? No, absolutely not. Saka, he has his moments. Kai Havertz is very inconsistent. I don't see why they should be favorites to win the Premier League. I don't think that it should be absolutely City. City is the best team in the world, let alone the best team in the Premier League. That's just my opinion. Short break here coming up. When we come back, we'll do a full Premier League Matchday 7 preview.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Before the break, we did react to Arsenal becoming favorites to win the Premier League. We move on to do a full Premier League match day 7 preview with the games coming up this weekend. A lot of games coming up. Obviously, it's a lot of games coming up this weekend. It's the Premier League. When does the Premier League not have a lot of games coming up on a weekend? Dumb statement for me, but this is obviously the last window till we last match day till the international break. By the way, we have Mauricio Pochettino's first international break. We should all be so excited for coming up after this. So, but let's get back on topic talking about this game. So Crystal Palace, they take on Liverpool. Crystal Palace, they had a bad loss to Everton this past weekend. An Everton team that that was their first win of the season. And obviously Everton were in a desperate position at that point, needing some sort of victory. because of how poor their start of the season been. But going back to it though, Liverpool been so good this season. Arne Slot has, it's been a dream start for Liverpool. And Arne Slot, he's really picked up from where Jurgen Klopp left off, and they're taking on a Crystal Palace team, in my opinion, which is not a strong team. Crystal Palace, they're basically the club that they always are, about a mid-table team. I think right now they find themselves 18th. They've been pretty lackluster so far, haven't won a single game, 3 draws, 3 losses. And I don't think that changes here. Taking on Everton, taking on Liverpool, that's a tough challenge. They play at Selhurst Park, so they can make it difficult for Liverpool. I think they'll try to make it tight and make it difficult for Liverpool to play against. But again, I just think the quality of Liverpool, the individual players that Liverpool have, will be able to get the breakthrough, and I think Liverpool will win this game. West Ham take on Ipswich. Ipswich are starting to get some points now. They've, drawing against Aston Villa, they drew against Aston Villa with that late goal from Liam Delap. They actually played pretty well, in my opinion, against Aston Villa. They've also, they haven't lost a game in their last 4 draws in a row, so 4 points from the last 4. They haven't won a game yet so far, but since they started off the season against Liverpool and City, which is a difficult game, 2 games to start off with as a newly promoted team, since then they haven't lost a game, they haven't won a game either. I think they find themselves in the game against West Ham that maybe they could get their first victory. Now West Ham, they had that draw against Brentford, but I think they conceded really, really early, and they created a lot of opportunities. But I think Ipswich, they've done good for themselves, and I think they're pretty good in transition. And West Ham, they're vulnerable in the counterattack. We saw what Chelsea did to them. They can defend really, really poorly in transition sometimes. I'd like to see what Ipswich can do. I think that'd be an interesting game. I'd probably go with the points for each team, but who knows? Arsenal taking on Southampton. Look, Arsenal, they're going to dominate this game. This is a sort of game that they've dominated over the past few years. They don't lose these sort of games, and this should be easy. But I thought that Leicester game that they played last weekend would have been easy. But yeah, Southampton, they've been abysmal so far to this season, in my opinion. And not that I expected much from them entering this season. They play like a newly promoted team. They've only scored 3 goals this entire campaign. They have the worst attack so far in the Premier League. Just looking at the numbers, and I don't see how they are able to manage to create anything going up against this Arsenal defense. And to be honest, this is the sort of games last year that Arsenal took care of within the first half or so. They really dominated these sort of games, so I expect something similar of that coming here. Leicester take on Bournemouth. If I read that correctly, yeah, Leicester take on Bournemouth. Leicester had that pretty decent performance against Arsenal, coming back in that game being down 2-0, and being level with Arsenal all the way to the final moments of the game. And they would have got that point where there was that late show from Arsenal. But yeah, and then Bournemouth, they're a decent team. They can create a few opportunities. They can play against the better teams as well. I thought they performed pretty well against Chelsea despite the loss. They just didn't have the depth to manage. I think just overall have individually more quality than Leicester City. I think Bournemouth are definitely the favorites in this one. Brentford take on Wolves. Wolves, they had a really, really tough start to the season, and they've had some really difficult games though. They had to go away to the Emirates and Aston Villa, and then they had to play against a Chelsea team that actually looks so far really good so far this season. And then they also played Newcastle and Liverpool. These are all teams that are going to be in the top 7 or 8, so really it's a really, really difficult start. As far as Brentford goes, they've had some rough start to games over the last few games, but they haven't performed bad. They've created opportunities here and there, and they've defended decently as well. Look, I don't know what to think of this game because of how difficult Wolves' games have been, but Wolves have been very, very open. And I think Brentford have the ability to take advantage of a Wolves team that's lacking confidence and that's lacking form, and that's that the momentum is going completely against their way. So I will have Brentford as slight favorites entering this one. City taking on Fulham. Look, their City just have too much quality for Fulham. Fulham has had a decent start to the season, don't get me wrong. They've been really, really good. They've created a lot of opportunities. And they've been, they've had chances to break on the transition, and they are a very fast team, and they're coached really, really well by Marco Silva. But City, sometimes City just has too much quality, and I think just that's the case today in this game. Everton taking on Newcastle. Look, Everton, they had their first win of the season last game against Crystal Palace, but they've been pretty poor this season, and they've given up leads, and they've been defensively shocking. Very, 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 very open for a team managed by Sean Dyche. Sean Dyche. They give up too many opportunities, and they concede too many goals. Newcastle, they've had a decent start to the season themselves. They're able to play against the run of play. They're able to get that goal against the run of play. They're able to, be comfortable in situations that they're not comfortable, if that makes sense of what I'm trying to say. And overall, again, sometimes these games choose themselves, and the quality difference between Newcastle and Everton and the form difference between the two, Newcastle will get that victory. Chelsea taking on Nottingham Forest. Chelsea so far, they've been really good this season. I do have to say they're coming off that win, the Conference League over Ghent, but overall had a really good performance, dominant performance going up. They've been able to, any team that's played a high line, they've dominated them. Any team that's been remotely open, you're talking about West Ham, Brighton, Wolves, they have been lethal, they have been devastating, and they've been very, very, very devastating and cutthroat in their attack. Defensively, there's still some vulnerabilities with this Chelsea team in the back line and the goalkeeping. But if you look at that attack, it's been absolutely devastating. And if you give them the space, they will trounce you. And they're playing with confidence, they're playing with form, and they're playing with momentum and rhythm. And there's a good feeling around watching the team. Nottingham Forest, they have suffered their first defeat of the season against Fulham, in which they were outplayed. But I do have to say, they've had a decent start to the season. Now, the thing is, Nottingham Forest, they have to make sure that they're not play too high up the pitch going up against Chelsea. You give them that space in behind, Chelsea will trounce you. If Nottingham Forest can have a balance, and yes, this game is being played. This game is being played in Stamford Bridge, so you can't, you could not be too open, or else Chelsea will break you apart. But if Nottingham Forest can find the good balance of being defensively solid, being tight, and still have some threats on the transition, I think Nottingham Forest, they can use that blueprint that they wrote for themselves at Anfield to give, Chelsea a surprise here. But I do think Chelsea will pull it out. We already spoke about Villa taking on United. Brighton taking on Tottenham. I'm really looking forward to this one. Brighton, they just got their first loss of the season against Chelsea, in which Cole Palmer had that quadruple. But Brighton have played some really, really good football now with Fabian Hurstler. There's that unknown element of him. We didn't know him entering the season. They play some good football. They have a balanced nature to them. And with Tottenham, look, I think Tottenham, again, they're going to come into this game and they're going to control the tempo. They're going to control the pace. They're going to play the game in their half of the pitch, and their attacking half. They're going to be in positions where they can, create a lot of opportunities. We've seen some cutting edge finally from them over the past few games. Can they continue it here? because Tottenham overall, they play some really, really good football, and they're fabulous to watch. I do have to say, I love watching Tottenham play, which you can't really say that about Tottenham since Pochettino's been at the club. So I do think, this is a difficult one. I'm going to say Tottenham get the win. I'm going to say Tottenham get the win. Short break here coming up. When we come back, we will react to some of the top soccer headlines. Before the break, we discussed the Premier League match day 7. We move on to react to some of the top soccer headlines, and we have to start off with Paul Pogba. We know he was initially banned for 4 years because of the doping ban, but it has been reduced to 18 months, which makes him eligible to return to football this upcoming March. The Court of Arbitration for Sports announced on Friday that the suspension is now 18 months starting September 11, 2023. Paul Pogba, he welcomed the decision, saying, "Finally, the nightmare is over. Following this decision by the Court of Arbitration for Sport, I can look forward to the day when I follow my dreams again. I always stated that I never knowingly breached World Anti-Doping Agency regulations when I took a nutritional supplement prescribed to me by a doctor which does not affect or enhance the performances of male athletes." 4-year bans are usually the standard for the World Anti-Doping Code, but they can be reduced in cases in which the athlete can prove that the doping was not intentional. If the positive test was a result of a contamination, if they provide substantial assistance to help investigations. Look, that doesn't make no sense to me, because look, if there's enough to prove that the test was a result of contamination, or if they provide a substantial assistance to help investigators. If it's a result of contamination, shouldn't the ban be completely uplifted if it's contamination? Because that's not Pogba's fault. The other one is if they provide substantial assistance to help investigators. I don't know what that means, to provide substantial assistance to help investigators. Does that mean almost be a snitch? It sounds like, it sounds like in the court, help the court make a case against someone else. I don't know. But Pogba, He said, "I play with integrity, and although I must accept that this is a strict liability offense, I want to place on record my thanks to the Court of Arbitration for sports judges who heard my explanation. This has been a hugely distressing period in my life because everything I have worked so hard for has been put on hold. I just cannot wait to get back on the pitch." It's been reported that Pogba has continued to maintain his fitness levels during this ban, and he believes that it's believed that it's not going to take much for him to be able to regain that sharpness, that match sharpness, despite he has not played a competitive game in about 14 months now. We know Pogba returned to Juventus in 2022 after his second stint at United, and he's been hampered by injuries. He's only played. He hasn't played much for Juventus. He was actually ruled out for France's team in the World Cup in 2022 with that knee injury. And yeah, Pogba, we know what the quality of Paul Pogba, the brilliant player that he is, the quality in midfield. He can do so many things in midfield. He can do so many things, but it's just that discipline sometimes, the injury record. And we hope that he comes back and continues to be the player he was, because this is a lot of time that he has not played football now. A really, really, really long time. But we know the quality. He's only had 8 appearances since he came back to Juventus in the summer of 2022. Since the summer of 2022, he's only had 8 appearances right now. And he's about to make his return in March 2025. That sort of, tells us, gives a story in itself. He's been, a lot injury prone and all that. And, well, let's see if he continues to be. And he can be a valuable asset to that midfield for Juventus, I do have to say. He can be an important aspect of that. Giovanni Reina, he has it's really bad. He has a setback again in his recovery for his groin injury. He strained his groin while he was training for the USMNT this past international window, and he ended up missing those friendlies against Canada and New Zealand. Now Dortmund has said that he had a setback in his recovery. They didn't really give much more details regarding the timeline for his return. It's been a long series of injuries for Giovanni Reina, and he's found himself in a rough position with Borussia Dortmund so far. Not, before the loan to Nottingham Forest, not really getting much minutes, and it was important if he was going to stay at Borussia Dortmund to get off to a fast start, to get on the right, the right side of Nuri Sahin, to get the belief, so Nuri Sahin can have some belief in Giovanni Reina. But he hasn't been able to do that because of the injuries suffered, and yeah, it's, disappointing. Also, speaking of Borussia Dortmund, they also have lost Karim Adeyemi. He's going to miss more than a month because of a muscle injury that he suffered after he had that hat-trick against Celtic. That's a big loss. And Adeyemi, he's an important player for Borussia Dortmund. That pace, that ability in transition. And yeah, that's disappointing for them. It's reported to be a thigh problem. That's a bad injury for them, and that's something that they're gonna have to adjust. Not having Adeyemi's pace in transition, that wild factor of him, his ability to get something out of nothing. I still remember to this day that goal he scored home against Chelsea. Chelsea ended up somehow winning that tie and moving on. But yeah, he is a brilliant player. Napoli, they defeated Como today. 3-1 win for Napoli. Scott McTominay got on the score sheet, as well as Lukaku and David Neres, all 3 new players that Conte has brought into the football club. As they got that 3-1 win over Como. They find themselves sitting right now top of Serie A, 4 points clear of any team. Obviously, they played a game extra with the rest of the teams playing 6 games. But Napoli, they've played some really, they've been very impressive. They got some really good results. But Antonio Conte, he said after the game that he wasn't sure if Napoli really deserves to be first place as Serie A, despite a comfortable victory over Como. He said, this is his words, "I don't know if this is currently a Napoli that deserves to be in first place in the standings, but we are first, and that is a fact. If someone has told me this 3 months ago, it would have been difficult to believe. We're growing in terms of temperament and in our ability to adapt, playing good football, but also willing to get our hands dirty when we need to. That's a great sign, and we have to embrace it fully. We started well in the first half, scoring a great goal, the result of our hard work. Then we changed things tactically in the second half, and they were no longer in the game. We lost too many duels, but that's a part of the process of rebuilding confidence, of self-esteem." And yeah, it's been a really good start for Antonio Conte so far. This Napoli team was really bad last season, and so far to be in October and find yourself first place in Serie A, I don't think you could really expect much more from Antonio Conte and this Napoli team. Thank you guys for tuning in to the GSMC Soccer Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. Thank you once again, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit.